the mic?
Starts.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Education USA Thursday live session. As we are celebrating the International Education Week starting from November 12th till 16th, we are having a guest at the American Center who's going to present the session on crafting a US-style resume. We cannot find a more apt example like Brian King today because he's an international exchange student and he's a Fulbright Nehru English teaching assistant. Brian King works with SSKV Higher Secondary School in Kanchipuram, and he's teaching English for the middle school students. So Brian, with his experience of studying in the US, and he graduated from the Villanova University, and he's going to share with you how to craft a winning US style resume. Not only a presentation, he's going to share with you a lot of resources that would help you to definitely write a better resume. And as you know, we are in the midst of a very critical time of the application process. Resume is one of the first things that all of you should be ready with. So without taking much of your time, I invite the online audience as well as those who have gathered here at the American Center. Please make use of this time, and we welcome Brian on board. And over to Brian, and he will take you through writing a good resume. Thank you, Brian. Yeah.
So talking about what it means to craft an American-style resume, let's take a look at this first. What is a resume? So the first thing I want to point out is it is not a CV. So looking at a curriculum vitae, it's a lengthy description of one's education and work experiences. It typically focuses on publications, conference papers, and presentations. But this is really a document that will explore the course of your life. So every professional and academic experience that you have had will likely be documented on a CV. This isn't the case with a resume. Likewise, it isn't a biodata, which might include your date of birth, your gender, your marital status, your religion, your parents' names, interests, or hobbies. A lot of this information would really be inappropriate to put on an American-style resume. So a resume is a summary of one's educational background, work experiences, professional skills, and achievements contained on a single page. So whereas these other documents, it might be appropriate to have as many pages as you can to show all of your accomplishments and all of the activities that you've pursued, a resume should really be concise enough that it fits on a single page. So if you have already registered for this program ahead of time, I'm sure Education USA has shared with you some resources, including example resumes. So if you've looked through those, you'll see that all those documents are a single page in length. So a resume is your first impression with any program that you're applying to. This is the first piece of the application that most admissions advisors will be looking at. So make sure that it's very easy to read. Typically, it's your first impression that can last only up to about 20 seconds. Within the first 20 seconds of looking at a resume, an admissions advisor is usually able to see the kind of basic parts of your qualifications, of your achievements, and your interests. So be sure that it's very easy to read. You'll notice on a lot of websites, as well as even word processing applications like Microsoft, that there are a lot of templates for you to just fill in your resume right there. I typically say to avoid them. A lot of times, if you type right into one of those templates, you'll have some spacing errors when you're going to save it and when you're going to print it. Also, a lot of them can be a little cluttered, and really you want to start with a blank document, and that puts you in charge of all the formatting, of all the layout, and that really ensures that your document will be as unique as you are, as well as all of your experiences. You will want to set your margins to about anywhere between 0.5 inches to 1 inch, and that is all the way around. So expanding the margins or minimizing the margins will give you more space to write as much as you can without bombarding or overstimulating any of your readers. Likewise, you're going to want to choose a 10 to 12 point font that is easy to read and professional. So this is really a way for you to be creative when putting your document together while still maintaining the professionalism that is necessary in the application process. At the very top of your resume, you're going to want to put your contact information. So that is going to start with your full name. So your full name is really the only part of the resume that should be larger than 10 to 12 point font. So this part can be 14 or even 16 point to really give yourself a good first impression to show the admissions advisors that your name is standing out, as well as your achievements as they continue reading through the document. After your full name, you'll want to include your home address. So this is going to be the address that universities and other program coordinators will be able to find you if they want to send you any acceptance letters in the mail or any resources that might be necessary for you in your application process. Likewise, you're also going to want to include your email ID. So this is probably the most common way that a university will be contacting you from the US side. So make sure that your email ID is incredibly professional. A good rule of thumb is simply your name at a common emailprovider.com. So, for instance, my email address is brian.king, my first name, my last name, and then at gmail.com. If you are at a university and you have a university-issued email ID, that's a great way you can put that on your resume. It's typically a more professional email. However, if you are using that university email ID, make sure that you will still have access to it after you finish your course. So if you've already graduated and you might be losing your email access within the next few months, make sure that you have an email that you have access to and that is on your resume. A good rule of thumb is also to avoid numbers in your email ID. So it's okay if you have like your name and then the number 1 or something like that. But if you're including your whole birthday, it typically can make your resume look a little bit less professional. And then of course your contact number. So WhatsApp isn't very common in the US, so if a university is trying to contact you, it'll likely be through just a regular phone call. So if they are calling you, make sure that your outgoing voicemail message is professional. So simply your name and ask them to leave a message. On top of that, if you are sharing any sort of social media, like LinkedIn or maybe even your WhatsApp, if they ask for it, make sure that your profile picture or your default picture is professional and appropriate and of yourself. So the education is typically a common and main component of an American-style resume. You are going to want to list your educational experience in reverse chronological order. So you will list at the top of the education portion of the resume where it was that you studied most recently. You will include your school's name, the school's location, including the city, the state, and the country. Typically for international students, always include the country as to where you are to show them that you are not only in Tamil Nadu, but you are in Tamil Nadu in India, because admissions counselors will be looking through applications from all over the world. So make sure to demonstrate what country you are coming from. Also, under the school section, you will want to include the dates in which you were enrolled. So if you graduated, you will also include your graduation month and year. And if you are planning to graduate within a particular time span, it's okay to put the anticipated date of graduation. So if you are planning to graduate in May of 2019, you may put that on your resume, despite the fact that you have not yet finished your course. Your degree, so if you have a Bachelor's of Science, a Bachelor's of Arts, a Bachelor of Commerce, anything like that, you're going to want to include that as well as your field of study. So as a student at the university, I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology. So I make sure to put all of that on my resume, including school information and everything like that. Another important component of the education portion of your resume is to include your scores, your grades, or your ranks. However, that's still optional. So if you scored within a very high rank of your class, or you have really exceptional test scores, it is typically good to put that on your resume, since that's an achievement you can be proud of, and you will want to be sort of bragging to the admissions counselors about that. However, if you were maybe in the bottom half of your class, or maybe your scores weren't as competitive as other people applying into your program, you do not need to put that on your resume. Nobody will be looking for it. However, if you do have a high rank, it would be good to list that. A good rule of thumb is that if you seem to be achieving in the top half of your class, so above average, it's good to include that on your resume and really toot that accomplishment. After your educational experiences, you will want to include your professional experiences. So again, you're going to want to use reverse chronological order. So typically on a resume, you obviously include all relevant professional experiences. So if you're applying to a course in engineering, you will want to include all relevant engineering internships or volunteer experiences. However, it's also okay to include other work experiences that might not be relevant to your specific field. So for instance, when I was in college, I also worked in a fast food shop / coffee shop. So I sometimes include that on my resume to show, although most graduate schools don't really care that I can make 45 cups of coffee in an hour, they are interested in knowing that I can work successfully on a team, working toward common goals, and really working toward professionalism in an American context. So with these professional experiences, you're going to want to include your position or title. So whatever that might be, for people applying right out of undergraduate, you might be simply a volunteer or a participant or an intern. So that's great. The company's name, the company's location, again, including the city, the state, and the country, the dates you were employed, and then an active description of your accomplishments and successes. So there, you're going to want to use what is known as functional verbs. So if you've already registered for this session, I'm sure Education USA has already shared with you a list of functional verbs. So these are action words that describe what you did, typically in the past tense, and that really put your experiences in real life context. So there, if you were working in a coffee shop like I was, not only did you make coffee, but you developed a strategic plan to support the customer experience. So you'll want to use that word develop, or maintained professional contact and communication with patrons. So make sure to always be talking about your achievements in a very active voice. Don't try to put it on the back burner. Don't try to play it down, but be very active, very functional in your experiences. Also, this last point for professional experience, you'll want to quantify when you can. So if you can include a number in your description, you're going to want to do that. So if you were the most efficient worker in a lab, you're going to want to say that you were the most efficient. You are going to want to say that out of 10 of your colleagues, you were number one. So that is something that you want to say. If you were tutoring students, you'll want to say, I tutored 15 students over the course of 3 years. And those students made progress by going from 5th in their class to 1st in their class. So anytime you can use a number to make your accomplishments seem more real world, and more practical, the better it will be in this application process. So other sections you might consider including on an American-style resume, one might be technical skills. So if you're applying to a specific graduate program where you might need to have access to a myriad of different computer programs and software that you have experience using, make sure to list it. Make sure that your admissions advisors know that you have experience in using these tools and that you are comfortable enough to do it in a professional setting. You're going to want to include languages. So any language that you can speak, you're going to want to list that on your resume. And be sure to say whether you're conversational or professionally proficient or a fluent speaker. So those are all great ways to show admissions advisors that not only can you speak the local language, you can also you're also professionally proficient in English, and maybe you're also conversational in another language that might be supportive to you in the field. So now, although CVs would have more of an emphasis on projects and conference presentations and publications, they do still have some place on an American-style resume. It typically wouldn't be the highlight of what you're presenting. However, if you have some really impressive projects or presentations that you have worked on, you can definitely include them on your resume. However, they typically would not be overshadowing your education or your professional experiences, but instead enhancing it and showing the admissions counselors that you have a really holistic understanding of the field you're applying into. Leadership, service, and community engagement are huge parts of the resume that American universities will be looking into. So not only will American colleges and universities be admitting really high caliber students that have great experience both in the classroom and in a professional work setting, they're also going to want to see who stands out from their peers in terms of leadership, who stands out in their community in terms of being engaged, being involved, and really promoting the common good within the community. Especially as international students, universities will love to see that you are not only promoting yourself, but also promoting the university, promoting the university's brand, promoting the university's international presence. And by admitting good leaders from India, you'll be doing exactly that. So if you have participated in any sort of leadership or community service project, be sure to put it on your resume and still follow that order of using reverse chronological order, quantify when you can, and actively describe when it was that you took charge. If you don't have any formal leadership roles, maybe you can share a group project that you did as a student in which you really took the lead, or you were the director, you took charge of communication between the group and the professor, something like that. But you can definitely highlight your experiences as a leader and as a community servant. Honors and awards. Your resume is really a place for you to celebrate all of your achievements and to present them in a way that is professional to admissions counselors, to show them exactly what it is that you have succeeded in the past. That's a great indicator of your potential success in the classroom and in your graduate programs when you're applying. Some people like to include objectives, ambitions, or professional profiles on their resumes. This is incredibly optional. If you are simply applying with a resume, it might be a good idea to include a professional profile, which might be a single sentence saying that you are an ambitious computer science student looking for admission in competitive international universities. However, if you were sending in the resume along with a cover letter or a personal statement or any sort of a university essay, that really isn't necessary on your resume, because then you can really highlight your ambitions, your goals, and your objectives simply in your personal statements. Some final remarks when crafting your first draft of an American resume is to order it in a way that markets you best. So if you weren't the best student as getting your bachelor's degree, it's okay to put your educational experience a little bit lower on the page. If you have really incredible professional experience, if you've had some really good jobs that you were proud of and that you were very successful in, definitely put those up top. Or the other way, if you don't have very much work experience, but you have really demonstrated yourself as a leader, either in the classroom or in the community, you can put that up higher on your resume. So typically that is what advisors will read first, whichever up higher, and that's really going to set the tone for how they perceive you as an applicant. You may also need several versions of your resume. When you're looking at different programs that you're applying into, some universities might promote more theoretical understanding of your field. They might be more interested in research and conference presentations, whereas other programs might be more interested in practical, hands-on experience. So know the programs that you're applying into, and you might need to make a new resume for specific programs. You're going to want to highlight the knowledge, skills, and achievements that directly apply to that program. There's no sense in saying that you are really well versed in practical, hands-on experience if you are applying into a program that really only cares about the theoretical. So make sure, and of course they go hand in hand, but really make sure that you know what a university is looking for first and foremost. Feel free to include those outside achievements. Even if it doesn't seem to totally relate to a master's program in computer science, some other experiences that you have had outside of the classroom very well can promote your achievements and what you're capable of, especially in a professional setting. So just like my example before of listing my experience working at a coffee shop on my resume, that goes to show that I'm proficient in interpersonal and professional communication. It shows that I'm good at working in a team, It shows that I can handle money. There's a lot of different things that can go into that. So make sure that whatever you're listing, be sure to sell that in a really professional way, to market yourself to the best of your ability. That being said, you want to highlight those transferable skills that'll be appropriate in graduate school. So whatever it is that you have done, explore ways that those skills and those achievements can benefit you and transfer into graduate schools. White space is wasted space on your resume. So if you're looking at your document and you see that there is a lot of blank space, you are going to want to fill that. Every centimeter of that piece of paper can be filled with an experience, with an achievement, with an award, with a leadership experience. So if you are not filling that page to the best of your ability, you are wasting space when you could be presenting yourself well. You're going to want to keep your resume to a single page. So you're going to want to keep that on one page, and you're going to want to maximize the space on that page. If it does go over, absolutely never, ever more than 2 pages. But you're really going to want to keep it onto one. You're also going to want to know your resume, and you're going to want to know it very, very well. Because if you get the opportunity to interview at a university in the United States, admissions counselors will be asking you questions about your experiences. So if you have listed something on your resume, be sure to talk about it. Be sure to explain it. Be sure to quantify it. And that will really show that not only that those are your experiences that you're very proud of, but it'll also show them exactly how talented you are and have been in the past. If you reference an achievement or an experience in a cover letter or a personal statement, it must be on your resume. If you are writing your personal statement about an experience that you studied in the United States for 3 weeks over the summer, it better be on your resume, because they are going to read something on your cover letter or on your personal statement, and they are going to want to find out dates, times. They're going to want to understand the context in which you did something. So make sure that is on your resume as well. You are always going to want to save your resume and send it as a PDF. That way you can review the document to make sure that there are no spacing issues, that everything is formatted correctly, so that when the admissions counselor goes to print it or view it on their side in the United States, it comes out exactly the way that you intended it to come out. Finally, your resume must be totally and completely error-free. This is your very first impression to universities in the United States. Make sure it is a good one, because a lot of times you might not have a second chance. So make sure that when you're applying, that resume is the absolute best it can be and totally and completely error-free. Does anybody have any questions about crafting an American-style resume?
So you told that we can order it in a different way. So I can put my educational thing at the end and put my professional experience at the first. It's okay?
Right, that's totally okay. You have some flexibility when adapting it. So the question was, if you are trying to reorder your resume in a way that promotes yourself best, can you put your educational experiences at the end and your professional experiences at the top? That's totally acceptable. So typically, if your educational experiences were really good, you will want to put that up higher. However, if you're more proud of your professional experiences and you think that will give you better leverage into graduate programs, definitely promote that professional experience first. Great question. Yes?
Sorry, I came in late.
That's okay.
I have a very basic question. There are many similar terms. In India, they say biodata, profile, resume, CV. What is the essential difference?
Yes. Here we go. So a CV, we go back to the question of what is the difference between a resume versus a CV and a biodata. A CV typically promotes scholarly research and data, a lot of conference presentations. Really, it encompasses all work, academic, and professional experiences that a person has ever had. A biodata includes things like marital status, religion, maybe social class, whereas those things would be very inappropriate to put on an American resume. So a resume is simply a summary of one's educational background, work experiences, professional skills and achievements, that is contained within one single page.
So for the academic purpose, only resume is to do.
So some
Resume
universities
style.
might request a CV, especially if
They
it's
will
for
ask
research.
for both.
They might. Typically, they will say either resume or CV,
Okay.
in which case the applicant will have kind of flexibility in whichever they would like to send. Typically, research positions will focus more on a CV, whereas maybe more practical and professional programs would focus more on a resume. Thank you. Any other questions?
You said not to use templates. Like, is there a way that they can find out using them?
Yeah, so the question is about using templates when making a resume. So you can use a template. There's some danger in that, given that it might not space the way that you think it will. But of course, you can check that out if you're saving it as a PDF.
There's an online tool that I like to use. And
Right, there are some. That's totally fine. It's your preference. I typically don't like those because they're a little bit harder to maneuver and they're harder to personalize. But it's totally fine to use one of those templates. I personally prefer starting with a blank document, and I can create the document as I want it to be. And that'll also make sure if you and every other applicant is using the same template, your resume looks a little bit less unique then. But if you have found one that you like and that is working well for you, that's totally fine to continue using it. Okay.
I have a question about rehashing information in
Mm.
your personal statement and resume. This is a common confusion most of the students have. What should I say in my personal statement? Can I repeat that in my resume as well? So if so, how do I go?
Okay, so the question is, how can we reiterate some of the information that we share in a personal statement on a resume? So as I mentioned a little while ago, if something is in your personal statement, an experience, an achievement, you will want to list that on your resume as well. And that will give the admissions advisors some way to look to see when that experience was had, what kind of experience was it? Was it educational? Was it professional? So definitely, if it is included on your personal statement, include it onto your resume. If you were afraid of rehashing or reiterating the same thing too much, you might be. So for instance, your resume is only one page, so you will want to share as many different experiences and as important experiences as you can on that one page. So maybe if you're explaining something in great detail in your cover letter or in your personal statement, you don't need to explain it in such great detail on your resume, but it would still be good to list it and to refer to it, so when the readers are reading your cover letter, they can also confirm that information with that on your resume. Great question. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is a personalized question actually. So my educational stuff, it's the CGPA it's not that good. So I would want to emphasize more on my publications and projects. So the thing is, when I'm writing my curriculum vitae, so my publication it comes to 2 pages easily.
Right.
So like, how do you emphasize that into a resume? That's my question.
Okay, so if you're trying to promote conference papers, projects, and presentations that might be able to supplement your educational experiences while still keeping your resume to a single page, it's doable. So if you're trying to promote conference papers, you don't need to necessarily include your rank or your scores or your grades on your resume. So that will save you some space there. On top of that, when you're including conference papers and presentations, you can list them, but you might not simply give the same explanation. So maybe instead of saying that you gave this talk on this day with this audience, you might simply say, I gave these talks, and you might simply list them. They might not even all need their own line. You might be able to just present them within quotation marks and say, I gave this presentation, this many times, or this publication in this journal. But you wouldn't necessarily really need to go into the deep citation. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
While listing these things, like professional experience or education, which is preferable? Can we use a table format or bulleted points?
Bullet points typically work best. So that way, you can simply, this is a great example. So you simply list that you were an intern at this organization. Your next line can start with a functional verb and then describe the work that you've done. So that's typically easy to read. These bullet points aren't really full sentences, especially since they're starting with an action verb. So you don't need any punctuation at the end of it. So if you find the table that kind of suits what you're doing, that's fine. But I haven't really seen that. It's mainly bullet points. Okay, great question. Any other questions on crafting an American-style resume?
Maybe can you share your experience on building your resume?
Absolutely. So just for my own experiences of crafting my own resume, it's always changing. So after every experience, after every event, there are some things that are going to be added, which means to keep it onto a single page, there are some things that will be removed. So sometimes I'm simply removing a description of an achievement that I had when I was attaining my bachelor's degree. Other times, I need to take off an entire community service event or a leadership event to show growth in maybe a professional context or maybe another academic context. So be prepared that your resume will change. But don't necessarily throw away those old resumes. Because as we talked about earlier, every program might need a different style of resume, promoting different achievements and different leadership positions. So make sure to hold on to them because eventually you might be willing to copy and paste into other documents like that. And again, my resume isn't simply my academic achievements. They are also different successes that I've had doing community service work. So if I was working, volunteering at a nonprofit organization or an NGO, I would definitely promote that, especially when applying to a US college or university, because of how much stock they put into community engagement. They don't want students to come to their campus, simply go to class and leave. They want students to create a vibrant campus community. And the best way to demonstrate that is by the ways that you're already engaged in your own communities here at home. Any other questions?
Do you recommend having multiple versions of resume when I send an application to a US university? I mean, a resume per university or a program that I'm applying.
Right. So the question is, how many versions of a resume should you have? So when you apply to one university, typically keep one version with that university. Don't send one admissions counselor 4 or 5 versions of the same document. But instead make sure that that resume is the absolute best version for the program in which you are applying. If you are applying into multiple programs within the same university, those might call for different resumes. However, if you are applying to a single type of program at one university, one resume would do the trick. And again, keep those other versions for other possibilities, for other professional development opportunities, for other admission standards at other institutions. Thank you very much for the question. Yes?
There is a choice between CV and resume, which is preferred.
If there's a choice between a resume and a CV, it's typically at the student's discretion. So if you were a student with a lot of conference proposals and presentations, a CV would definitely be a great way to present all of those opportunities. Also, if they're looking for a resume or a CV, they typically wouldn't have a page requirement or a limit. So you can really kind of mix between the two styles as a resume. You can have a multi-page resume and present it as a CV. So if a university doesn't really have too much concerns over which it is, a resume or a CV, that's up to your discretion, and typically universities will honor whatever you send them. Great question.
Since the resume is a one-page document, we won't be able to add all the things that we do. So if there's a professional experience, but it's older than the recent one which I took, but that's the one which is the best. Can I let go of the reverse chronological order and state it first?
You should definitely include the most impressive achievements.
At the first, and then put on the later one, the recent one?
It's not totally orthodox.
Okay.
So most people would still prefer the reverse chronological order. However, you could bring more attention to an older experience by describing it in more detail.
Okay.
So whereas a newer experience might not get a description and might simply be listed, you would bring a reader's attention to that possibility or that achievement by describing it a little bit more. Or maybe even, giving it more of a description would definitely bring the reader to study that in more detail. So try to maintain the reverse chronological order. However, if you have done something in the last month that isn't as prestigious as something you did a year ago, definitely include the thing you've done a year ago. Whatever you can do to market yourself for the programs that you're applying into. Yes?
Can we use all the formatting tools?
Yes.
Like bold and different fonts?
Absolutely. So just like I used boldface print and italics, you will definitely want to do that. So in my own personal resume, if I'm listing this presentation that I'm giving, in italics, I will say that I was a presenter. In boldface print, I will say Education USA. And then in normal font, I will say Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. And then in that same normal font, I will also include the date in which I'm doing this, and then below it, give a little bit of a description of the presentation that I gave.
Some people specify plain text only.
Most resumes in an American context, and correct me if I'm wrong, are very open to boldface print and italics. Simply because,
Standard.
yes.
Avoid underlines.
Underline can also be appropriate. Underlining is totally fine. So whatever it is that you are doing to present yourself, make sure that it is consistent. So if you're using italics to present your titles, use that for all of your titles. If you're underlining your school name and company names, make sure that it's consistent throughout the document. But boldface print, italics, underlining is totally appropriate, and I would strongly recommend it.
And at most 2 or 3 fonts. Too many fonts.
Typically one font throughout.
Oh, typically 1.
Yes, one font throughout the document. And everything should be within either 10 to 12 point font, except your name. Your name can be a little bit bigger, typically 14, even 16 point font. But everything else should be one professional and easy to read font style between 10 and 12 point. Great questions.
Any other word of caution that you would advise students who are right now working on their applications?
One thing that I would suggest is before you get too far into the application process, write your resume. I know I myself, that is always the first thing that I do in an application process. And when you're going through your resume, what pops out to you as the most, what do you take the most pride in? What do you think has been your greatest achievement? What do you think has been your greatest involvement? And that is going to be what you will write your personal statement on. So once you go through your resume, what is the most prestigious experiences that you've had? And then once you have that, you can present it in your personal statement. You can say, I did X, I learned Y, and I will now present what I learned in this context in your graduate program. But you can really do that a lot easier once you have a resume down. And since it's only one page, it's really easy for you to kind of rank things. What is the biggest success that you've had as a student, as a professional? So this not only gives admissions counselors an easy way to look at a summary of all of your achievements, but it also gives you kind of a jumping off point before you get too deep into the application process. What are the things that you want to sell about yourself the most? How are you going to market yourself to these universities? How are you going to celebrate your own achievements? And a resume is a great place to start. So are those all of our questions for today? Okay, very good.
So one last question. It's not about the resume writing. So Brian, as I introduced him in the beginning, he's a Fulbright Nehru Fellow English Teaching Assistant. So I would like you to share your experiences of being in India and teaching the middle school students English.
Right. So as Shanti mentioned, I am a Fulbright Nehru English Teaching Assistant. So I'm teaching spoken English to 6th, 7th, and 8th standards at SSKV Boys Higher Secondary Matriculation School in Kanchipuram. So there I teach in an all-boys school, 6th, 7th, and 8th standard, spoken English. And it is certainly a different experience than I'm used to coming from being an undergraduate student just outside of Philadelphia in the United States. So for one part, I am now a full-time teacher. So I'm in this school all the time, but in a different role. So I'm now standing in front of the classroom leading groups of middle school students, which is incredibly exciting. But one thing that has really struck me about my students the most is the curiosity for the cultural exchange. These students are so interested in asking questions about what the United States is, what it's like, and kind of most impressively, what it isn't. They get a lot of glimpses from the US on the news, in movies, and books that they've read in school. And a lot of what they ask me is, well, is this true? And quite frankly, it's hard for me to navigate between what they have seen in maybe a Marvel movie compared to what life is actually like in New York City. So it's really exciting for me participating in this cross-cultural exchange because one, I can present my own experiences as an American in an Indian context, but it also gives me the great opportunity to ask questions to my students and to ask them, so what is life like in India? And a lot of times they're correcting me on things that I might have seen in the news or things that I've read in books or seen in movies. So that is by far the most rewarding part of my cultural exchange. For all of you that are considering going to the US to study, it's such an incredible learning experience. Yes, because of what you're doing in the classroom. Yes, because of the projects that you'll be undertaking. But the cultural engagement, the immersion, the fact that you will be living maybe 7,000 or 8,000 miles away from home. There'll be some culture shock. And you'll certainly come home with some new ideas, some new understandings, some new questions. And I think that's so important. I'm so excited to go home to the United States just to ask questions to my peers that I've been asked here. And frankly, they haven't had the privilege to be asked yet. So I cannot speak highly enough of the cultural exchange programs. Education USA and USIEF do such an amazing job of facilitating them, and I know that they're great resources for you here in Chennai. And of course, I'm here, so if anybody has any questions after this presentation, I am more than happy to share them with you. So I think that is all for me today. Shanti, anything else to add?
Yeah, I will just. Thank you, Brian, for a great presentation. And as I begin the session, we are celebrating the International Education Week this week, starting from November 12th to 16th. This is an initiative by US Department of State and US Department of Education, which definitely promotes this kind of cultural and educational exchanges. So I thank all the online viewers and also those who have gathered here for being with us today and asking such valuable questions, which will not only you, even others will benefit by that. And we keep encouraging you to be in touch with us for more such sessions that are going to come in the future. And just before we close the session, I have an announcement about our next month's sessions. On December 13th, which is a Thursday again, we will be having with us at the American Center a representative from University of Chicago, and she will be talking about doing graduate studies in the US. So many of the graduate students who have gathered here, that will be again a very valuable session for you to know about the process and understand various things you need to keep in mind to apply to US universities. Thank you again and have a great weekend all of you.
Thank you.